Hi everyone, and welcome to this piece discussion video for the piece No Filter from the series 21st Century Royalty. Just a quick overview of 21st Century Royalty. This series is in my postmodern body of work, and the series itself explores and examines the sort of kings and queens of the modern era. Those individuals that we idolize and revere in the 21st century, as well as the qualities and the characteristics, the personalities, the types of people we aspire to be in the 21st century, much of which swirls around social media and the internet and the culture that has sprung up as a result of it. Likewise, with 21st century royalty, are we looking at figures that are hoisted into the public eye and the public attention, not necessarily of their own accord or not wishing it upon themselves. For a more comprehensive description and analysis of the 21st Century Royalty series, you'll find a link to a publication I wrote in the description of this video. With that out of the way, let's look more specifically at the piece No Filter, starting with the title of this piece. So the phrase itself is an ironic nod to something people use on social media when they're trying to claim that some image they're sharing is being put up without any sort of filter or overlay applied. There are no edits. It's an insistence that there is authenticity when incorporating a brand deal or an affiliate as well on an image. So for example, if somebody was doing a sponsorship, they would maybe still use the idea of no filter to present themselves as being unbiased or not having any sort of agency. Yet it's always a presentation. It's always viewed through the bias of social media. So there is always agency inevitably. And the arena itself affects how the image is understood and received by viewers. There's a great deal of irony in the phrase no filter, and that's why it became important to me in the inspiration for this piece, because, again, there is always a filter. If it's being viewed online or presented online, it is always through that lens, not to mention the other layers that are always usually going on underneath. Moving on to the composition, I was inspired by the view of a selfie. You'll see the line work in this piece has a bit of a squarish look to it. I wanted to create a composition that purposefully puts the image and puts the figure in that sort of package that we're used to seeing for the sort of square orientation of a shared social media image. In the background is a subtle throne peeking up behind the figure, and there's a warmth emanating further back with a sense of glitz and glamour to capture that sense of sheen and glimmer of social media. The color behind the figure is called Dahlia Purple, and it was the first introduction of this color into the 21st Century Royalty series, and it actually created quite a misstep. The value after I applied the resin ended up bleeding, which does happen to some particular hues, but I didn't anticipate it at the time. And so the result is a far more garish pink color than I had actually anticipated. It adds quite a lot to this piece because with the 21st Century Royalty series, the sense of bombast and experimentation is meant to be at its fullest. And so this is an example of utilizing a hue to a large extent, only to find out that it ends up behaving a bit differently than expected with the resin. Below the frame and below the figure is sort of a mishmash, a disaster, a wretchedness of conflicting values. We have figures with speech bubbles, written text, handwritten text, letters, math equations, all of which creates this sort of underbelly, if you will. And above the figure, up in the heights, we have bombast with the toy airplanes, the 3D glasses, the crown emoji, all of which to create this sense of playful, juvenile sentiment, or even maybe a kitschiness to this piece. Now with these compositional choices obviously come the conceptual makeup of this piece. To begin, the idea of the shimmer and the sparkle and the glitz and glam, it's all sort of a veneer of social media. It's all meant to evoke this sense of the ultimate sheen that's above, but the reality below, and the ugly sense of what's actually lurking below the surface. The 3D glasses asks to be inserted, which again adds to that ironic insistence that there's actually always a falsehood going on. It's all this veneer that's promulgated in an effort to present what is genial under a false idea of there being no filter. It's a bitter irony that anything hoisted into social media is always false and doctored and constructed. It's never a true view of reality, no matter what the person presenting it online may be. No matter how much we insist that there's no filter, there always is some kind of filter or some kind of ultimatum, some kind of agency. The words hashtag not an ad appear, which is another bizarre phrase that really became cliche over the past decade on social media. Again, it's one that people will use when they're doing some sort of sponsorship or brand deal or trying to present a brand in a way that's supposed to come across as more sincere, but ironically, it became overused to a degree that it just became its own cliche and became its own mark of insincerity. And obviously this juxtaposed to the very brazen pink Victoria's Secret logo across the figure's chest is another sort of ironic touch to that too. This underbelly that I keep referencing is, again, it's meant to point to the ugly reality and the machinations below. I wanted to create this feeling of a gatekeeper's boys club that social media sort of creates in its groupthink and mob mentality. The calculations and numbers and the dollar signs, all of those little things are meant to hint at the sort of transactional nature of social media, of the internet, the marketing and the domineering by, those money-hungry companies trying to utilize individuals to attract customers by way of cultural icons and influencers. It seems that companies themselves have become incredibly privy to the fact that influencers have a major pull on those to which they share images and text and ideas. And so it became very commonplace to try to use faces that seem appropriate in order to reach buyers in a way that doesn't seem corporate, when in reality it really is. This piece also echoes a lot of personal feelings I was having at the time of its production in 2019 with regards to the attitude of galleries and curators on social media. I was really feeling like the way that galleries and curators can present themselves almost makes social media and one's following as a sort of status symbol, or even creates sort of a stratification regarding success as an artist based upon these numbers. I was really feeling a lot of this at the time on social media when it came to how things appear on the surface in the art world, but in reality, it can be really ugly and really money driven. And even the sentiments that people might express, I was learning at this time, they aren't often sincere. Obviously, now the time has passed, looking back upon this piece in that period, I reflect that it was good to learn. And I think it's much better now that I have a grasp of this reality. I'd like to end now too with just a few of the references in this piece. I mentioned the Victoria's Secret pink logo. My sister is the model I utilized for this piece, and at the time she was actually wearing a pink Victoria's Secret sweater for this particular shoot. And so it sort of inspired me to incorporate that logo in particular just for that slight nod. The text box that I utilized that has not an ad inside of it is styled akin to a 90s Macintosh OS aesthetic, something around like iOS 9 that would have come out in the late 90s or early 2000s. And there's a bit of a agreeability I have for it, or affinity I have towards that sort of aesthetic. And it would later come to become a part of the series ILY 2 down the road in the piece Our Microcosm. That, again, was just another slight nod that felt like something I could do in order to sort of make that connection very quietly of my own accord. I think I'll stop there for now. This isn't meant to be an exhaustive look at the piece No Filter, but I do hope it's a starting point to really help foster a deeper experience and connection for you with the piece as the viewer. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and I hope you'll share with anybody else who might find it worthwhile. And until the next one, thank you.